At any rate, we have our next guest, Vinson Cunningham, and he is a journalist himself, and he wrote a book, his new novel. I believe it's his first novel, if I'm not mistaken. But okay, he's shaking his head. Okay, so, and his novel, I happen to have a copy, and I read the book, so I have questions. So,
Beautiful.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's called Great Expectations, and welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you
Now,
for
I'm wondering, did you title it Great Expectations? Was that your idea?
It was. I went through a bunch of different titles, some of which were better than others, but none was like totally satisfying me. So a friend and I at a party, kind of almost in a joking way, said, "Wouldn't it be great if you could call this book?" I had written the book way before I came up with this title. If you could call it that, and then it just grew from a kind of a joke in my mind to something that I thought would be kind of ironic, sort of funny, and also um, bring forward some of the things that the character in the book really cares about.
Okay, well, for those of you who are out there in Black Authors Matter TV land, um, if you watch the show, we discussed it that titles can't be copyrighted. If people are wondering about that, a book title can't be copyrighted. So, Great Expectations was a book, a classic. I think it was by Charles Dickens, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And it's like 100 years old or something like that. It's, so, but I like the cover. Now this he's out to sea, like the person on the book cover is
Sure.
like adrift, like he's adrift. I
Yeah.
guess that's like a metaphor for what?
Well, there's a lot of first of all, I should say the painting is one of my favorites. It's by Winslow Homer.
Okay.
Also old, this is mid to late 19th century is Homer. And that's a painting called The Gulf Stream. And many of my favorite writers have written about this painting. Derek Walcott, the poet, wrote a beautiful, one of my favorite poems about this poem. And it's just a view of this sort of, on one level, kind of peaceful background, and on the other level, this like interesting figure, right? This is black guy who like almost looks like he's at rest, but he's also kind of looks like he's stranded. It's kind of ambiguous as to what's going on with this guy.
Mhm.
And that's a little bit like the narrator of my book. His name is David Hammond, and he's a young guy who has sort of been swept onto the campaign of this senator who goes unnamed in the book, but has many resemblances, of course, to Barack Obama.
Mhm.
And one of the things that David thinks about a lot is water. He, like I, was sort of taught to think about water in many ways, whether it's, Christ walking on the water, or how water shows up in certain books about the Middle Passage. He's always thinking about and thinking in water nautical metaphor. So I thought it was appropriate for the content of the book, this painting.
Okay.
so I don't know. I'm liking what you're saying about how the picture, the painting kind of
Hmm.
symbolizes a lot that goes through the book. What do you think came first for you? Was it the painting inspiring the story, or was it the story or you had written a story and then the painting came later?
I wrote the book first, and once you've kind of given your draft to the editors, and you're on your way toward the finalized text, is when they start to talk to you about all these other things, the jacket and all these things. So I'm uh I love visual art. It's like one of my uh one of the things that nourishes me, I guess. So I was way too like eager about this task. I had this meeting about the cover, and I made a whole PowerPoint presentation of like different paintings that I like, that I'm interested in. This would be cool, that would be cool. And based on that, we started a process of going back and forth. What about this? What about that? They would come and make a mock-up. And then at one point I sent them this painting and saying, this is one of my favorites. What if we could do something with this? So it was this really wonderful collaborative process, but it all came after, just like the title. So For me at least, some people, the title that they first come up with is the title, but I'm not the best titler, so both title and jacket were ways of me finding just some final touches to make things kind of um come together even better.
Okay. So is this an autobiography labeled as a novel, they more or less?
Well, it's interesting. The simple answer is no, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in here that did not happen to me.
Okay.
A lot of the plot points that happened certainly later in the novel didn't happen to me. And if it was a book that was just about what happened to me when I worked on the first Obama campaign, as I did, it would be boring, and that it would not be something. It would not be a project I'd be excited to write. But and this is something that is like true for me across lots of my favorite novelists. Like James Baldwin's first novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, was about a kid in a church, very much like the church that Baldwin grew up in. The early college scenes of Invisible Man, like Ralph Ellison, that's a lot of the world he came from. So a lot of my favorite books have some relationship to reality, even though it's not totally fixed in the fiction. So um, David Hammond, the protagonist, his life before this campaign is a lot like mine. Both of us grew up in New York or born in New York, had um, uh, Bible study teacher mothers and church choir directing fathers. Lived in Chicago for a time, came back and lived in New York, and joined this really like world historical campaign almost by accident. Those are things that happened to me as they did to him. But things start to diverge once the story gets going. But I did think a lot about what from my life I would like to use and what not to, and what to make up and what to use. It was a constant thought that I had.
Okay.
So you are a journalist.
Yeah.
So do you feel that, I mean, and journalistic writing, I'm a former military journalist, and I
Oh
work
wow.
in public affairs now, and I'm also a fiction writer. And one of my biggest struggles was journalistic writing and transitioning that to fiction writing.
Yeah.
Um, you have to write shorter, and brevity is key when you're writing
Yeah.
journalistic. Was this something that you kind of had to overcome when you started writing?
I was lucky in this way because the journalistic work I do is almost all in the New Yorker magazine, where I'm a staff writer there. So the work that I do, whether I'm one of our two theater critics, but then I sometimes do long reported pieces about people. So I did, in 2016, I hung out with Kirk Franklin for a bunch of months and did a long article about him. I did a long profile of the comedian Tracy Morgan, um, people like that. So luckily, the magazine work that I've done has given me some space, some room to run, and space to be creative. um, I um, I started writing this novel not long before I started working at the New Yorker. So on some level, like those two parts of my life, those two parts of my brain were happening all at the same time. So sometimes I would like learn how to do something through my journalism that I then wanted to see if I could make work in this novel, or vice versa. While I'm working on this very private project, I would say, let me practice that technique over here in this space they give me in this magazine. So for me, those are like sort of parts of a whole that kind of help each other out.
I will say that you were fortunate in that. In my case, I was fortunate because when I first joined the army and I was writing for the base newspapers, I would got a lot of freedom to write more futuristic feature type stories. So
Yeah, yeah,
I write longer stories, but it was so totally different when I started writing books.
yeah, yeah,
I had to remember, okay, I have to be a little bit more descriptive now. I can't
yeah.
just I can't just tell you the sky is blue and then keep moving.
Yeah, yeah. It is a different kind of even though I get to write longer pieces, I still do have a sense of like, okay, what's the word count? What's going on? Whereas this, it's all everything is your choice. One thing that's amazing to me about journalism that I really love is and which helps me get my work done. I can be very slow as a writer. Like I'm not gonna lie to you about my process or anything, but um, it is very comforting to know like there is a page somewhere with your name on it, and somebody is doing an illustration or they've made a photograph or this or that. Like you better fill that page up. That's your business now. Like you don't
Yeah.
want, and that has always helped me get my work done. So to this is much more internally motivated, right? Like nobody is hectoring you like, hey, we need to print this book tomorrow. Like if you don't do it, then it just won't get done. So it's a just whole different way of thinking for me. And so it was hard to like, okay, yeah, how do I expand? How do I slow down time in this motion, speed it up in this it's lots of different freedoms that you don't often get.
When did you start writing the book and when did you finish? Like
Yeah.
what years?
Sure, yeah. I started writing a version of this book when I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to be in 2013. And I worked on that for a little bit. And then in 2016, I threw it all away except for one page.
Mm.
Um, and that's because it was like 100 pages or something. And I was like, this is not what I want it to be, except for this one page, which was a scene where a character is sitting in the middle of a party and he's looking at a painting on a wall and is thinking about his, it's reminding him of certain things in his childhood and his upbringing, what has brought him to that place. And I realized that that was what I wanted this book to be, someone experiencing something in the present tense, but always letting it, making those things, making his mind move around or um, making him go back into memory or thought or even worship in places, whatever. Um, so I started with that in 2016, and then you will recognize this. The day that I finished it, the day that I had finished it such that I was ready to send it out to editors, um, uh, I clicked, send to my agent to send the thing. I came out into the living room that I'm sitting in. I turned on the television, and on CNN, instead of the election certification that I was hoping to see, it was a bunch of white guys in army clothes trying to get into the U.S. Capitol. It was
Yeah.
January 6th, 2021 was the day I finished this book. Or finished the first draft of this book. So it was weird, from 2016 to
Mhm.
2021. Really, I wrote this book about the Obama beginning over the course of Trump's presidency,
Mhm.
which was just weird just to be thinking about this time and experiencing this one.
Mhm. Well, I asked because uh, well, I wanted to know if you kept a journal or a diary. That was when I was thinking this was an autobiography, more or less, the
Uh-huh.
label a novel. But you did start it not that long after the 2008 election.
Hmm.
2013 is 5 years as opposed to 10 years or some things, some details would still be fresh. The ones that you kind of put your personal experience as a fictional scene.
Hmm. Yeah. It was interesting. So after I worked on the first campaign, I then moved to DC. And first I worked for the Democratic Party, the Democratic National Committee, where I worked as a fundraiser, just like I did on the campaign. And then
Okay.
after that, I worked in the White House for almost 2 years. And then I left DC, came back to New York, with the intention of kind of trying to make my way and eventually become a writer. So it was a whole experience, not just the 18 months that are characterized in this book, which are just, oh
Right.
07 and oh 08, this time of the campaign. But the years after, even this time in my life when I was trying to, I don't know, I guess, understand this country better um, as a result of being this close to power in this really strange way. So yeah, on some level, even though I didn't know that this is why I was doing, I just wanted to write a book that had a lot of parties in it.
That was true in here. It was interesting though. It's
Yeah.
really interesting.
So how much of that one page that you salvaged from that first draft, how much of that is in the current book?
That page survives almost totally. For a while, it was when I first cut it out, I just said, okay, this is now the first page of the book, and so I wrote for a while with that as the first page of the book. After I
Okay.
kept revising the book, and I can be a bit of a perfectionist. Um, it ended up being it's in the second or third chapter, this one page. But so yeah, that page is there. It's just a couple of paragraphs. So you would kind of zoom past it. But for me, it's like a sort of really important moment that kind of shows the reader what kind of book this wants to be.
Now, your writing style is different from what I generally read, in that it's almost like a long magazine article.
Mm-hmm.
He's a magazine writer.
I know. That's why I know it's true. It was very creative the way you told the story.
Thank you. Yeah. I've always been a reader, and I've always loved novels that, I don't know, give you the news from a new point of view almost, that, you know, I could think of so many books that happen in a certain year and they dramatize a historical event. And for whatever reason, I've always learned better from fiction than I can from, I did from history classes or whatever. So, so much of American history has come to me through fiction. So that's one of the things I think about a lot. Like how can a work of fiction also contain something about like history and how we experience it together?
Are you still in the DC area?
No, I live in New York. I'm in Brooklyn right now, and my mom still lives in the apartment that we moved into when I was 13 years old. I'm a New York guy. When I was a child, I lived in Chicago for 6 years, and then we moved back to New York.
Wow. I see you've lived in some places that inspire a lot of writing: DC, Chicago, New York.
Yeah, I'm a city guy. I just got back. I was doing something at the Los Angeles Times book festival last week. And just thinking about how much of I'm driving through. LA is a weird city to me because you have to be in a car so much. But just thinking about as I passed all the people and looking at the downtown skyline up ahead, just how much cities have I don't know, nourished my life as a writer, just because there's always something new, there's always something to observe. I don't know, like walking through a city feels like being the narrator of a novel to me. Do you know what I mean? Like just because of all the different descriptions you have to do along the way. So yeah, and yeah, I've always loved Chicago as a fiction city too. I love Saul Bellow. I love so many books that kind of either happen in Chicago or pass through it. So yeah.
Yeah, Chicago is a scene in a lot of novels. Of course, New York too.
Yeah.
But that's true of television as well.
Right.
There's
That's
more
right.
in Chicago than there used to be, because everything kind of used to be both of the coasts. But now Chicago is making this mark with
Yeah.
the Chicago Med, the Chicago Fire, and the Chicago PD.
Oh
I
yeah.
watched two of them.
I haven't watched any of them yet, any of the Chicago's, but I did always wonder why, like, okay, they got the Chicago PD. I'm just waiting for like, Chicago ACS. Like what's next? What public service are they gonna do next? But I I do love Chicago and I love to see it. Yeah. I remember when what was that? Family Matters, when they would come in on the skyline. Dun, 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 dun. I love to see it.
Yeah, now for me, the book really highlighted the central focus of young people in the even though Obama's name is never mentioned in the book, but the reader knows that's who it is,
Yeah.
because everything else says Obama. It's just his name is not it.
Yeah.
But it really does give you the sense that young people were running things and they really didn't know what they were doing, but they had a lot of passion and commitment, and they had a lot of belief in what was the candidate,
Yeah.
and the historic nature of what they were doing.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Um, I have a daughter who's 18 years old now, so I think about this all the time, just like what it is to be, young apart from your parents, but noticing things about the world that you live in for the first time, and first those first moments of feeling like, okay, somebody older than me has given me a raw deal, and it's up to me and people like me to make a better world if we want to make it one, you know. And there's a lot of comedy, of course, you know, you get older and you see some things, and there's some comedy in how much they don't know and think they know, and you know, that's always a theme, you know. You look at the young and you say, if only you knew. But at the same time, they sort of point the way from us. Like right now, half a mile north of, I just told you where my mother lives, at Columbia University. Um, the students there just, you know, occupied a building, and they've had this encampment there because they just don't like seeing images of children being murdered on TV all the time. You know, that they have seen these images that come out of Palestine, and they say, we don't like that, and we don't like that our school helps to fund these atrocities, right? Right now, the police have just before this, I was listening to their student radio. I'm speaking of like young journalists. They're like amazing. They sound like I don't know. They sound like Channel 7 radio, but um, just thinking about how sometimes it takes that youthful ignorance, that youthful
Naivety,
and
idealism.
it takes a lot of that just to believe
It
that you
does.
could, you know, I don't know.
It does.
It takes a lot, and this world saps you of that. Yeah.
I
But that's
mean,
what happened with the civil rights movement.
that's what I was
It
gonna
was
say. If we look
done by young
at
people.
history, if we look at history, it's often our young people who have led a lot of these movements. In
Yeah.
the 60s and the 70s and so forth.
Mhm.
It's often the young people who lead these movements. And so I think in some ways it could be naivety, but the other part is just being bold enough
That's
to
right.
say, I don't agree with this and this is wrong.
That's
So,
right.
I mean, this is just history continuing to repeat itself.
It's so true, and you're right. We shouldn't say it's naivete, but I don't know. For me, 9/11 happened um when I was a senior in high school. And then not long uh, before my daughter was born, there was Katrina. And then there was, right after the Obama campaign, the financial crisis. And then um, Trayvon Martin. And then, you know, the election of Trump, COVID, you know, on and on. People my age, and I'm not you know, I'm just a guy, I guess, in terms of my age, but it's like, have already kind of learned this like helplessness. Like life tries to teach you that nothing can be done, that,
Mhm.
you know, it's too late. We're already on the slide down, you know, and people who haven't been taught that false lesson, you know, often make the rest of us kind of remember what it was like to believe in that way. So I totally agree. It's not just naivete.
No, it is idealism
Of
too.
course. Yeah,
Yeah, idealism is a better word for it.
that's right.
But youthful idealism, normally you don't have that when you as you get older. When past
Yeah.
the point, you know, then you become cynical, and you know, it's just the stages of life that people go through. Now I have a couple more questions because I have my I don't know if you can see my I have some sticky notes.
I love it. That's the best thing. It's the most satisfying thing to see somebody paid that much attention to what you made. I appreciate that.
um on page 149.
Okay, let me get mine as well. Let me
Okay. All
make
right. And somebody else may have already asked you this.
sure.
You referred to Reverend Wright, but in the book it's Reverend Reynolds. Now, what I wonder is, was that did you intentionally change the name, or did that not get picked up in the edit?
No, all through the book there are people who I realized um that sometimes I really had a reason that I wanted to keep somebody's name. Um
Yeah, because I noticed that some of the people's names were actual, like you refer to Al Sharpton in the book.
Yeah, there are people
And
that cross the text like you know, like almost making cameos. There's Cornel
yes,
West is in it.
yes,
Henry Louis Gates is in this book. Others are. Uh,
yes.
but for some, and I think why I tried to, it's funny because this is something one of these things that I, who should I try to like fictionalize and change just enough that people know who it is, who, all that. And I think there's something about how I've intentionally kind of made all this distance between the narrator and the Obama figure, not naming him, leaving him almost kind of a void, almost in the background, is not as in the book as much as you would think, right? Um, because of that, I thought that somebody who was so closely associated with him, I should also, put behind another pane of glass, if that makes any sense, that moment to me, um, I don't know. That moment, and then the moment after Obama got into the White House when he had that beer summit with Henry Louis Gates and
With
uh
the
White
torch
paper.
thing that happened
the
when he
racist
was
white police
breaking
officer.
into his own house.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There were moments like that. That to me, when we think back on them, feel almost more like a myth than like something real that happened. It's like almost this, when you read Greek mythology and it's like the labors of Hercules and he just has to like go through these weird things, Rich Reverend Wright always felt that way to me. It became not about the substance of what Reverend Wright had said, but about um, is this a test that the candidate can pass? Can Obama give the speech that's going to get him out of trouble? It wasn't even about what has America done to be spoken about in that way. It was, can he talk his way out of this one? As if it was just like a trap or something.
Well,
So
I thought, to me, when it happened, I thought he was done.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
the way that they kept doing that on the endless loop, showing that over and over and over again, I was like, this is it. But
yeah.
he did talk his way out of it.
That's
Well,
right. And it's so I think that's why, because it was this like it almost felt like this mythological thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to just like put it a little bit off into the distance a little bit more. That was the I think
Okay.
thought. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
and if there were a lot of we're gonna get him moments throughout that.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, yeah. You
But
know,
when he said that Kanye was an ass, he thought Kanye was gonna go off.
yeah.
They tried to make that into a huge deal, and it wound up being nothing.
Oh, I mean, the whole, there was a lot of that. And it's so hard to, now because we think about his presidency as such a big thing, it's hard to remember those first days, how everything of it, I was in New Hampshire after he had won Iowa. I was in New Hampshire, and after he lost in New Hampshire there, and just like the feeling that everything depended on that day, um and how urgent, and I don't know. I don't think we've had a moment like that in our politics. It's almost like Trump has been the sort of funhouse mirror of that. It's like we can't look away, but it's for such a different reason or something. But it just try to part of the imaginative thing, the creative process here was just to imagine my way back into that time and try to see it from a different angle.
Okay, I have one more sticky note.
Okay.
Um, the demographics of Obama's staff.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, I have this on page 228. But the way it was described, and
Uh-huh.
this is because I noticed it, and I'm sure other people noticed it too, was basically the same as that of his both administrations. Not all that diverse.
Well, it's so funny. I don't know how the numbers panned out during the whole administration, but I do know that, as a young Black staffer on the first Obama campaign, there was often this really anguished conversation about, okay, we're trying to elect this guy, but most of the people that are in charge here are white. Like, what does that mean? Part of it means that the only people that have been able to get this level of political experience over the last however many decades of Democratic politics,
Or
whether
centuries.
definitely centuries, but the ones who are alive, like how many
Right.
people have run a state campaign? And because of what the opportunities were before, you can't say that many Black people have done that. Now we learned partially through this process, partially through Obama, how many people there were who had been in these campaigns in unsung positions, but a lot of people just didn't even get a chance to be thought of in that way, you know. And
Yeah.
so it was weird to sort of be in this moment where um Obama was what's the amazing thing about Obama, the unfair thing about him, the reason he won probably, is that he was such a strong symbol. He meant so much. He probably meant more than a person is supposed to mean, you know? Um, but it was weird to have that outward symbolism, but then the real realities of how history has worked behind the scenes,
Mhm.
that duality is interesting to me.
Yeah, and one thing that I noticed a lot during his administration, both of them, he was the only black person in the room a lot. I mean, like more
Yeah.
times than he was.
Yeah.
Which he was very comfortable being the only black person in the room. That was the other thing I noticed. And that's because he had a white mother. He was raised by white people, and so it wasn't new to him.
Well, that and even so, like, of course, that is true about him, and that has to mean something. But also to be a black person in this country who's even going to be close to doing something like that, being the president, you have regardless of who raised you, you are going to have practice in that room many times over.
Yeah,
Whether
that's
it's at
true.
Harvard Law School, maybe you have to
Yeah,
go to a good prep school to do that. Most
yeah.
black people I know, even those of us who like to, we mostly hang out with black people, whatever, all of us know what it is to be that only and have had to make that a place that we're comfortable in our lives. Um, it just doesn't happen in our world anymore that someone gets to like, um, you know, they used to call it being in the bosom of your people. That's when
Yeah.
their teachers were talking about, you can't just go from that to the top of the mountain anymore.
No.
There's a lot of ladder in between.
Yeah. Well, this has been a very, very amazing, interesting conversation.
It was so much
Uh,
fun. And can I
okay.
tell you, you guys are good luck. The New York Knicks are just a couple of seconds away from winning their first round. And and just, I haven't been watching, but I've been receiving dispatches. And so you are the best luck. That's the best thing that ever happened to me tonight.
Well, my NBA season is over. The New Orleans Pelicans were swept, so I'm
I'm
done.
sorry. I'm sorry that happened. I was so sad about Zion I was watching when he got hurt. Terrible.
And
But
my team didn't get there, and my team is the Warriors. Golden
oh, the
State is my
Warriors.
team.
Well, they're just
So they've been there many, many times. So, give somebody else a chance.
oh well, we'll see. Well, I'm gonna watch these last 15 seconds. Hopefully they don't mess it up. But we'll see. Thank you guys so much. This has been amazing.
Thank you. Have
Okay,
a
thank
great
you.
Bye.
And congratulations on the book.
Thank you, and thank you again for letting me share in your platform. It's such a wonderful show. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.